Okay, will do.
All right, we're about to start. We're all set to go?
Yes, we can go, DSG.
All right, thank you very much, Audrey. So, ministers, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, everyone listening and following live on YouTube, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are. Welcome to this launch here from Paris, the launch of the 2020 OECD Digital Economy Outlook. I'm really delighted to open today's event to showcase the OECD's work on a topic whose relevance has grown immensely in the last months, the digital economy. Over the next hour, we will hear about the digital economy, how it's been evolving, and the implications for a global recovery from COVID. We will hear from two OECD countries about their digital policy responses to the pandemic. COVID-19 continues to cause tremendous human suffering, with its impact permeating every facet of our lives. The toll on the global economy is also severe, of course. But digital technologies have helped our economies and our societies avoid a complete standstill. And there's no doubt that they will continue to transform the way we live, the way we work. The Zoom boom, as demonstrated by the format of today's discussion, is just one example of the COVID-induced digital acceleration that we've witnessed over these past months. Widespread connectivity has allowed many businesses and individuals to adapt to the crisis. Children with at-home internet access began attending class remotely. Many firms adopted digital business models to maintain operations and preserve revenue flows. Even before the pandemic, we saw governments increasingly putting the digital transformation at the center of their policy agendas, including devoting more attention to emerging technologies such as AI, blockchain, and 5G infrastructure. That paid dividends for sure, as many countries around the world have been able to use such technologies to learn more about the virus, accelerate the search for a vaccine, and track the development of the pandemic, just to mention a few examples. Yet while the pandemic is further accelerating an already rapid digital transformation, it's also revealed that we're really just getting started on this journey. COVID-19 has raised the bar for digital inclusion. It runs the risk of bringing new challenges and opening new divides. The new OECD Digital Economy Outlook shines a spotlight on the increasingly important role of digital technologies and communications infrastructures in our daily lives. It considers how the pandemic is amplifying opportunities and challenges from the digital transformation and reinforces the link between digitalization and economic recovery. Today, OECD's Director for Science, Technology and Innovation, Andrew Wyckoff, will present the highlights of the Digital Economy Outlook. Following Andy's brief remarks, we'll hear interventions by four esteemed panelists. Paola Pisano, Minister of Technological Innovation and Digitalization from Italy. Ki-Young Choi, Korea's Minister of Science and ICT, it's a video address. And then Hee Kwon-young, Director General for the Korea's International Cooperation Bureau at the Ministry of Science and ICT. And then Deepak Mishra, a lead economist at the World Bank and the co-director for the World Development Report 2016 on Internet and Development. The OECD experts behind the Digital Economy Outlook will then be available for questions following the panel. So please do submit questions anytime via the Q&A function on Zoom, accessible via the bottom panel of your screen. colleagues from the OECD Secretariat will be moderating the chat today. Please feel free to state your affiliation when asking questions. I have to say, as already said, the webinar is also being live streamed on YouTube, and it will be available also on the OECD website after the session. So I'm looking forward to a lively discussion, and it's my pleasure now to invite Andy to take the floor. Andy.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary General Knudsen. It's my pleasure to present this year's, let's see if I can do it. Well, maybe I will just do it this way. It doesn't seem to be working for me perfectly, and that's the new normal, it seems like, with the era of COVID. Let me just quickly outline that this year's edition of the OECD Digital Economy Outlook is the third edition. It provides a holistic overview of converging trends, policy developments, and data on both supply and demand of the digital economy. Not surprisingly, as the Deputy Secretary General has said, it will have a special focus on how the COVID-19 pandemic is amplifying opportunities and challenges from the digital transformation. While it may be too soon to pass judgment on exactly what the impact of COVID-19 will be on digitalization, will it be a one-off or will it have lasting effects? It's highly likely that some changes will last, but the question is at what level? The publication includes a short supplement on digital transformation in the age of COVID, about building resilience and bridging the divides. It also contains 92 different indicators, all of which have stat links to the underlying data, which provides more data for people who want it. In 2017, OECD launched the Going Digital Project. This is a very large undertaking across the OECD to study the digital transformation underway. Under the auspices of the project, the OECD developed an integrated policy framework, which you see here today, to examine the digital transformation through 7 themes affecting the economy and society. These, in fact, are the main themes as well as the 2020 Digital Economy Outlook, along with a spotlight on emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and blockchain. The 2020 edition of the Digital Economy Outlook is a comprehensive volume, compiling data from 37 member countries as well as our partner countries. Now, I cannot do this justice in just 10 minutes time, but I can try to capture the main trends that it identifies, and I'll quickly go through these. But number one is, in fact, improving connectivity. And where we've seen over time a vast improvement in the way businesses and individuals are able to adapt to the crisis with digital technologies, as Deputy Secretary General Knudsen just said. But what's important here is the digital divide persists. These are persistent gaps in access, use, skills between regions, localities, and countries, between age and gender groups, between different sectors and firms of different sizes. It puts a spotlight now on the digital divide and shifts it from being maybe what was a boutique, more techie issue to a central macroeconomic issue akin to what I would call, adequate housing. Inherent in this is the need for trust. It's only through trust that we can reap the benefits of digitalization and our increasing reliance on these digital solutions, as well as new emerging technologies. All these are adding to the urgencies around privacy and digital security. And finally, the impact of COVID-19. The pandemic has accelerated the digital transformation, compressing in some cases what have been years of change into mere weeks. Things like telework and distance learning have sprung out so that everyone is using them in a very short period of time. But these shifts, again, have accentuated the gaps that exist and have raised the bar of what we consider digital inclusion. And progress needs to step up to begin to mirror the changes we see going on in the economy and society. I'll give you some examples of these trends before concluding with some key messages. In recent years, the number of telecommunications subscriptions measured by access paths continues to grow. In particular, mobile connections, the top blue line in this figure, are growing at a faster pace than fixed broadband connections. Key drivers behind this have been the widespread adoption of smartphones, higher mobile broadband speeds, and the evolution of wireless networks and more commercial offers that offer unlimited data packages. This has made people much more dependent on them, has unleashed a lot of interesting applications, and with it, a virtuous circle for demand for higher quality networks. And COVID-19 has only added to this. Some operators have experienced as much as a 60 to 90% increase in internet traffic growth compared to before the crisis. Meanwhile, fixed lines, like telephone lines, will continue the long-term decline and are increasingly replaced by broadband fixed lines. Moving to the next slide, thank you. But in spite of these improvements, important gaps remain. For example, in fiber, we find fiber is critical for advancing connectivity. It can create both faster access speed, but also plays an important role in transferring data, what we call backhaul. And it's essential for moving to the next phase, such as 5G. And yet it only makes up 1/4 of the fixed broadband connections in the OECD. As you can see from this figure, they're in incredibly different situations that prevail across OECD countries. For example, in Korea and Japan, the percentage of fiber in total fixed broadband connections was around 80%, while the share is below 5% in countries such as Germany, Austria, UK, Israel, Belgium, and Greece. Other gaps are evident in terms of the sizes of firms, both in terms of connectivity, as shown here in the top figure, where the black line represents the difference between large and small firms, as well as the use of specific information communication technologies like big data analysis, which is shown in the bottom figure, or even cloud computing. As digitalization is transforming business models, production and competitiveness, these gaps become all the more critical and are important for policy to step into and try to reduce. If we are looking at individual use, we see gaps as well, with data indicating significant gaps by age, education, and income, as we see in this figure. This figure shows that in some countries, these gaps are very big and virtually non-existent in other countries, such as in Scandinavia. Across OECD countries, on average, about 96% of the individuals from the top 25% income households, the triangle here, used the internet in 2019. But the share dropped to 74% amongst those in the bottom 25% income households, a gap of almost 22 percentage points. If we look at online activities, which vary by their sophistication, from sending emails through online purchases and use of the cloud for job searching and online sales, we see important differences in activities between countries. Over 80% of individual users send emails on average, but only about 40% use it for online purchases. And we see big gaps between countries are found in activities such as e-government access and online purchases, with some countries below 20%, while others at 80%. An obvious trend in this year's Digital Economy Outlook is the impact of COVID-19 on digitalization. One aspect of this uptake of technologies, which we're using today, we see a leap in the use of certain online communication platforms, particularly as the lockdown hit, as you can begin to see in these figures around March of 2020. This is the result of massive numbers of people and organizations who switched to telework using tools like these for the first time. And as this figure shows, video conferencing applications, Zoom, Skype, and online tools like Trello, Slack have experienced marked increases in use in countries for which data are available. In this case, France, Hungary, and Poland. Now, such tools help teams share information, coordinate, and collaborate, and have been essential for keeping the economy and society going during this period of confinement. Many of us have experienced teleworking since the beginning of the year, which is a direct impact of COVID. As you can see from the chart in this slide, and I look forward to hearing Minister Pisano in a second, changes in business models affect all industries, but naturally to a different extent, and not all sectors have the same teleworking potential. We were able to get very good data from Statistics Italy that shows that teleworking during the lockdown actually reached almost its potential across many firms as measured in some sectors, such as the blue bar here. And moreover, there's been why we've seen a decrease as the lockdown eased a bit between the triangle and the circle here. Again, it was far above where we were at the pre-COVID levels. Again, this differs significantly across sectors, but it's an important indication that even after the COVID pandemic passes, things will have changed on a more permanent basis. Just to conclude with some key messages, coming out of the Digital Economy Outlook 2020, first, COVID is impacting us all in similar ways. But when you dig down into looking at individual countries, individuals themselves and firms, each has a different experience. And it means that we need to prepare for a reaction to these that will be different across countries and firms. Second, countries have begun to step up to the plate. They've started to adapt their policy environments with national digital strategies being developed. What's important is they're not too narrow. They need to be broad enough because, as I've said before, this is enveloping and consuming the whole economy and hence needs a coordinated effort across the government. Third, to ensure the economic recovery, we must understand that the digital economy is integral to the economy, and this needs to be reflected in strategy and policy. The digital economy needs to be put front and center. Thank you, and I really look forward to our speakers today sharing their perspective on the digital transformation, COVID-19, and the economic recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andy, for setting the scene for today's discussion. I will now turn to our panel and remind you that this is to highlight the use of digital technologies to monitor the spread of COVID-19, but also to discuss policies to close new digital divides created by the pandemic, and then of course also hopefully to offer prospects on the role of digital transformation policies in paving the path to recovery. And I'd like to start by inviting Minister Paola Pisano to tell us about Italy's experiences and her views on how digital transformation policies can help pave the path to recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you. I wish to thank the Deputy Secretary General Andy Wyckoff and the OECD Secretariat and the SEDEP team, in particular Ulrik and Vincenzo Spiezia, for the invitation. We have quite a few delegates to the Committee on Digital Economy Policy, and it is a real pleasure to attend the launch of the Digital Economy Outlook 2020. The Italian government has put considerable attention on the innovation and digitalization policy area. Indeed, As we mentioned in the Digital Economy Outlook, Italy is one of the countries with a dedicated minister and Department of Digital Transformation, which helps the successful implementation of a coherent digital strategy. Indeed, we are aware that designing better policies for the digital economy and the society require first, understanding technological changes, second, an holistic strategy, and third, flexibility in order to keep pace with innovations. We studied hard. Let me briefly explain how our digital strategy is moving forward and how we are trying to tackle some of the weaknesses that the DEO underlines. As more people, things, and data go online, reliable connectivity underpins the access to the digital technologies and facilitates the interaction between connected people, organizations, and machines. According to the Digital Economy Outlook, the share of fiber in total fixed broadband subscriptions in Italy was about 7%, while in the OECD countries it was 27%. In this regard, our ultra broadband project aims, among others, at coverage of 85% of the Italian population at 100 megabytes per second, and in the area of major economic interest and higher demographic density. Starting November 2020, we earmarked 200 million euros to help eligible families with vouchers to buy fast internet connectivity and a personal computer or tablet. Yet, connectivity is not enough. We aim at fostering the uptake of cloud computing and interoperable data centers in the public sector. The transition to a cloud paradigm entails considerable advantages in terms of increased reliability of system, quality of services, cost savings, and accessibility of data remotely. This strategy enables public administrations, companies, and citizens to reap the benefits of agile and remote working models, a soaring trend since the outbreak of COVID pandemic. Once an effective, accessible, and secure digital infrastructure is provided, the government must be concerned about how citizens, firms, and government itself actually use digital technologies. The DEO mirrors a dire picture of the use of digital technology in Italy compared to the OECD countries. First, diffusion of online commerce. Italy score about 40%, while OECD about 60%. Second, individuals with diversified and complex use of internet. Italy scores about 38%, performing steadily last. Third, individuals who use the internet to interact with the public authorities. Italy scores about 24%, while OECD about 58%. So Italy is far behind. we are aware that a part of this gap may be due to a lack of digital skills. The Italian Republic initiative introduced in the 2020 is an attempt to give a response to such an issue. It is my conviction that the more accessible and user-centric digital public services can be used as leverage to increase the share of the population actively taking part in the digital society. Our strategy provides coherent and targeted investment based on three important pillars. The first one is the high quality, efficient, and easy to use digital services for every citizen. Second, the full deployment and adoption of digital payment platform. The name in Italy is PagoPA, and the meaning is pay through the public administration. And the application IO, the meaning of IO is me. PagoPA allows citizens to make electronic payment with the public sector, and the application IO is based on mobile-first approach and enables citizens to interact with the public administration through one single channel. And third, the diffusion of the digital identity to easy citizens' interaction with digital services. Today, almost 30 million of Italian citizens own digital identity. However, my interpretation of our role as a government in the fourth industrial revolution goes beyond the aim of building the so-called digital government. We are aware that innovation happens mostly in the private sector. This is an imperative for us to easy and promote the way toward innovation. The outbreak of COVID-19 made obvious the need to be agile. And I believe that government must respond with agile regulation. We introduced and passed a law, the name is in Italy Sperimentazione Italia, that allows companies, universities and research institutions to quickly experiment with frontier innovation and within the most suitable ecosystem to engage the right actors and to ensure that disruptive innovation opportunities are not missed. A positive outcome of the experimentation will lead to a redefinition of the regulatory framework and scale the innovation at the national level. Our digital strategy will inform Italy's upcoming G20 presidency agenda, and we wish to focus on the potential of digital identity, agile regulation, and finally the artificial intelligence for the public sectors. Finally, I want to conclude my speech to underline that for us, the OECD work it is an aspiration for our strategy, and it is not only an aspiration, but it's also a drive for our ambition. We will strive to improve and move forward the digital transformation of our country. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. It was really interesting to hear your thoughts and insights and ambitions on a wide range of issues, really from skills and access to skills to connectivity. And I was particularly intrigued by your words on agile regulation, which is something that we have been advocating and working with at the OECD. So I think the world can feel safe that Italy will chair the G20 next year. We feel in safe hands with you, your insights and your ambitions. So thanks.
We start to talk to the agile regulation last year in the OECD meeting. So for us, it's really a pleasure to say that now it's law in Italy. So thank you also to your help.
No, thanks a lot, and that's what I remember. So it's just lovely you taking that on board and moving it into the G20 space. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.
And with that, we now turn to another very distinguished speaker. We're delighted that Minister Choi of Korea could share his views about Korea's experiences in using digital technologies to monitor the spread of COVID-19. As I said, it's a short pre-recorded message, but it will be followed by live remarks from Director General Hee Kwon-young, who is with us today. But first, please welcome the 3-minute video by Minister Choi.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Choi Ki-young, Minister of Science and ICT of Korea. First, I would like to express my regret for not being there myself with you. Instead, I'll be giving my remarks via this video. I believe the OECD Digital Economy Outlook is the key to sharing
the recording has stopped.
Discussing the direction of our policies and addressing global challenges. In particular, the publication of the DEO this year will be an important momentum for international cooperation in the digital economy sector. It will help us explore a new direction of digital innovation to tackle the global crisis of COVID-19 and will suggest us cooperation measures to improve the quality of life of humanity. ICT is serving as an essential driver of our fight against COVID-19 by prompting the development of COVID-19 test kits, assisting effective social distancing, and contributing to vaccine and treatment development. Korea applied AI technology to test kit development in order to shorten the product development cycle. AI is also used in analyzing chest X-rays of COVID-19 patients and eased the burdens on healthcare workers. Korea also developed self-quarantine safety app and the epidemiological investigation support system to curb the spread of COVID-19. Face mask information apps and websites were created to share information about where to buy face masks and their stock quantity. This has contributed to efficient distribution of face masks. With a surge in demand for contactless services like remote working and online classes, the government has expanded the traffic capacity to ensure stable digital services. We also opened an official COVID-19 website to provide accurate information about the virus, such as new confirmed cases per day, while endeavoring to find the right balance between privacy and data utilization. These efforts contributed to building people's trust in the government's COVID-19 response and laid the foundation for prompt actions by relevant organizations. In particular, in July, the Korean government launched a national initiative called the Digital New Deal to overcome economic and social difficulties caused by COVID-19 and to actively respond to the spread of contactless services. Data, network, and AI, or D&A in short, will take key roles in the Digital New Deal. The government will promote the collection, release, and use of data by establishing a so-called data dam. Through the data dam, we'll make public data more open and accessible and manage the overall collection, coupling, and use of public and private data. The government will also provide vouchers for service companies to process their own data for AI training and spread 5G and AI-enabled conversions and services, such as self-driving cars, by adopting them in the public sector. Furthermore, we will actively nurture contactless industries to initiate new digital innovation by establishing a smart healthcare infrastructure and helping SMEs operate their business online. The Korean government would like to foster people-centered, inclusive digital environment so that all countries around the globe can overcome the pandemic and usher in a new age of digital innovation. I wish you all good health and safety, and I hope today's meeting serves as a forum for meaningful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these very interesting initiatives. It's always interesting to learn about initiatives from other countries. This is what we're about at the OECD. So I will pass the floor now to Director General Young, and I hope you'll pass on our appreciative remarks to the Minister as well. Director General Young, you have the floor.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Hee-Kwon Jung, Director General of the Ministry of Science and ICT, Korea. Today, I'm going to share with you how Korea is using ICT in its response to COVID-19. Korea's response to COVID-19 using ICT consists of two parts. The first part is using ICT technology to control the virus and pandemic. Second part is utilizing ICT investment as an economic stimulus, as well as a tool to transition to the digital economy. First, I would like to three Korean examples how Korea tackles pandemic situations using ICT. When genome sequence of COVID-19 was released by Chinese scientists, Korean companies started to develop PCR test kit. It took only 3 weeks to develop and approve the first COVID-19 test kit. ICT and AI technology was used to speed up the development process. Even though PCR test is accurate and widely used in Korea, it took at least 6 hours or more to get the result. To get the test result as soon as possible, two Korean AI startups developed the AI software to analyze chest X-ray and CT images to diagnose COVID-19. Using this tool, we can get the test result just 5 seconds in the case of chest X-ray and 1 minute for the CT images. Next slide. Next slide, please. Korea also developed the epidemiological investigation support systems, which enables the automations of the epidemiological investigation process to quickly and accurately analyze a large amount of data. Take a look at this flowchart. It shows how the system operates. When COVID-19 cases confirmed, the Korean CDC collects related information from relevant agencies. Based on the information, the system quickly identifies the movement of confirmed COVID-19 cases and the measures such as the shutdown or quarantine for areas visited by confirmed cases will be taken. Next slide. Next slide, please. When first waves of outbreak in Daegu, you may remember the news from the CNN or BBC, the long line of people for buying face masks in Daegu. The shortage of masks is a serious problem in the early stage of the pandemic, and people wanted to know where they can buy the mask. To tackle the challenges, Korean government released the sales data of masks to private sectors. Private company developed the application service based on the data. After this service, it became very convenient to get the mask. People have the exact information where they can buy the mask. Next, the three key examples show several benefits of ICT combating the virus. ICT speed up the development of test kit. ICT have to enhance accuracy of the diagnosis of the COVID-19. ICT also have the decision making for policymakers as well as the ordinary citizens. Next slide. Next slide, please. Now I would like to present Korea's new national strategy, the Digital New Deal. Next slide. Digital New Deal is a DNA-based strategy to overcome the economic crisis. DNA stands for data, network, and AI. Digital New Deal aims to minimize the economic shock by creating jobs. It creates not only government-supported jobs for low-skilled workers, but also jobs that support the structural transition toward a digital economy. Next slide. Next slide, please. Korea plans to invest $48.5 billion by 2025 to accomplish the following four goals through the Digital New Deal. The first goal is to improve the ecosystem of DNA, data, network, and AI. Second, nurture contactless industries. Third, digitalize education infrastructure. And the final one is digitalize social overhead capital. Next slide. Next slide. The most important project of the Digital New Deal is to build a data dam with DNA. The data stored at the data dam will be collected, processed, analyzed, and used to promote innovation based on emerging technology and create new business. We plan to collect data generated through networks, standardize the collected data, and process and use it to develop better, smarter AI, which will help us innovate existing industry and develop groundbreaking new services. This will create a cycle of new jobs and opportunities. Next slide. Of course, Korea is carrying out this project according to Korea's circumstances, and each country will need a different solution. Yet, I wish that Korea's experience can help you reduce errors that help all of us to overcome this crisis together. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Director General Young. It's always interesting to hear from the different perspectives of countries, and we thank both you and, of course, Minister Choi also because he had time to make the record or to record his video during the National Assembly, I understand, of Korea taking place sessions right now. So I will now like to turn to our third speaker, Deepak Mishra. He will discuss the much needed policies to close new digital divides worsened by the pandemic. Deepak, you have the floor. But you're muted. Could we unmute?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Would somebody be able to upload the slide, or should I do it myself? I was asking, should I do the slide myself? Okay, very good. Okay, so I'm going to present very quickly. You've heard a lot of presentations about how countries are coping with the COVID crisis, and digital technology have been useful in that process. I'm going to argue that while COVID-19 has given a very natural boost to digital adoption, there are significant issues that could actually unwind or could actually lead to further digital divide in the long term. So to do that, I'm going to present a very simple framework to think about those issues and apply it to a different context. So the next slide, please. And I'm going to do that using a framework that we developed in the World Bank in the 2016 WDR, which looks at the benefits and risks from digital adoption. Previous slide. Yeah, so let's start with a very simple digital diffusion curve or a function, which shows on the x-axis the time scale and the y-axis the level of technology diffusion adoption. And as this curve normally shows, that this is a S-shaped curve where you have the low-income countries at the bottom end, the middle income somewhere in the middle range, and the high income at the top end. And the curve shows the shape such that it takes a while for countries to gather a level of digital adoption that is helpful to create growth, jobs, and service delivery. When you're in middle income, it moves faster, then obviously eventually you reach to a level of digital saturation that you see. So what COVID has done, shows in the next slide, is it has given a bump up to those digital diffusion curve. But obviously at the top end, the diffusion is already reached to the saturation. And this is for a specific technology, let's say broadband. So if you look at Norway or Finland, you're pretty much at the top end, and there's not much that you can do beyond what we have already done. But whereas you can get a lot more in the low income and middle income countries. So clearly this would imply that the digital divide would get narrowed in the short term, because the low income countries are seeing increases much more than what you would see in high end and middle income. And what's interesting about this is, even if in the magnitude sense, it shows as if the low and the low income is pretty tiny. But if you look at the y-axis, which is how much time it would have taken to achieve that level of digital adoption, it's much more in low income than high income. So low income countries are making a much faster leap in terms of going to where they could have been in 6 months to 8 months, then that would have taken them nearly a year. And a lot of people have talked about, and in the standard mainstream media, you'll read a lot about how digital adoption is happening in many parts of the world and how it's really changing the landscape. But I would say just hold on for a second to see whether actually this is going to create to what we really care about, which is economic development. So now let's turn to the next slide. And so the blue line still remains the technology diffusion, but what we know is the technology alone is not enough in closing this divide. What we also need, and this is what we call the analog complements of digital technology. So by analog complements, I mean quality of institutions, level of skills, and level of business regulation, quality of business regulations, which combiningly actually define how much a society is able to absorb this technology. So if you look at this, and unfortunately, unlike technology, which initially starts slow and moves fast, the complements tends to move in a linear fashion. So what you see in the beginning of countries which are at the low end, you'd see that many of them have actually complements that might exceed the level of technology, because the level of schoolings and skills are somewhat decent, the regulations. And so in that case, if you increase your digital adoption, it actually is a good thing. And whereas in the top end, you could actually have situation where your complements fall short of technology, where the adoption has reached to a stage that there are now digital monopolies, or there's massive inequality in the society because there's a high skill, low skill, and polarization of the labor market. And of course, you could also have a situation where there's more control by corporates and government and digital technology. In that situation, even if you have adoption, it may not lead to more welfare increase. And so let's go to the next slide. So what we're seeing is there are worries in the long term that the complement might actually start to decline. And this is most visible in what people talk about, the human capital scar that this COVID crisis could induce. There are kids which are out of school. There are people who are not able to invest in higher education. And obviously the initial budget, additional budgets are basically going for helping people to stay alive. And there is a decline in a lot of other investment. In addition, we have also seen, because of growing protectionism and other things, some of the quality of regulations have deteriorated. And so, but this is a speculation that if the complements start to shift rightward, what you would see is the benefits might actually reduce in the long term, because the level of schoolings, the level of institutions that are needed to keep up with the technology might actually fall down. So we might actually end up in a worse situation unless we do the right things right now. So let's go to the next situation, which is more positive. What we actually can do to make this happen. So if, so as we say in the World Development Report, it's the final digital dividend is an outcome of a race between technology and complements. So COVID has given a natural boost to technology. So, and because the situation arises such that countries and the households and the enterprises and the government had to adopt technology, and that's a good thing. But we need those complements to keep up with the technological progress. So only if the post-COVID response gives a similar boost to complements, benefit will, only then will benefit outweigh risk. In which case, so the way the graph is shown, so if a country is at point A, which is the technology and the complements are at the right level, so the moment the technology curves move upward, you're going from A to B. That's a short-term impact. If you move your complement curves dramatically upward, and there are countries which are actually able to do it. I mean, Korea is a good example that after the 2008 global financial crisis, they made a massive investment in a lot of the broadband activity, which is what they got ahead of the other countries. So you can move from B to C, which would be so A to B will be your short-term impact or the short-term benefits from higher digital adoption, whereas A to C would be a long-term benefits from higher adoption. And that would be the ideal situation where actually COVID could lead to a much better outcome, both in the short term and in the long term. So let me go to my last slide to make a conclusion. And before that, I just want to say that we have looked at several countries in developing world and looked at what has happened to the digital adoption post-COVID, especially on the enterprises houses. We in the World Bank, we run what is called Pulse Business Survey across 40 developing countries. And what we are finding is exactly what we were expecting, which is many of the small enterprises and businesses adopted technology because that was the right thing to do. And they've got a bump up in the sales and profit. But what's also interesting is many of them are actually dropping those options when the COVID goes away. So you would expect that digital adoption is a natural process. Once you adopt it, you'll stay with it. But we are actually finding that, so let's say in Cambodia, we found there's a 20% increase in digital adoption in the first 5 months of COVID. But after 8 months, that has actually come down to 11%. So clearly, it's not something that will stay unless we have the complements and support that the firms, business, enterprises, households need to continue to harvest the benefits of that of the digital technology. So the message that I want to convey is strengthening the analog foundation of the digital evolution needs to be a key part of the Build Back Better movement. If not, you would actually might be worse. So COVID-19 has given a natural boost and breached the digital divide in the short term. But the boost can be temporary and could be reversed if analog complements don't keep pace. And what are those complements we have in mind? Regulations to reduce monopoly power of digital platforms, higher education and skills acquisitions that can become more accessible and affordable, and institutions that are more democratic, accountable, and transparent. And if you do that, we could actually end up using COVID to get higher digital dividends, faster growth, more jobs, and better services. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this illuminating speech about the relationships between benefits, complements, and the technology. Time is running, and we don't have as much time for Q&A as we would have hoped for, so I will quickly turn it over to Ulrik, who's our head of Digital Economy Division here at the OECD, and maybe to manage just a few Q&As. I'm not quite sure if we have a very hard deadline at 2 o'clock or not, but I will hand it over to you, Ulrik, please.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary General, and thank you to all of our fantastic panelists for being with us today. We see quite a few questions coming into the Q&A, and so I want to make time for just two of them, and it might take us a bit over 2 o'clock, but hopefully not too much. I'm joined today by members of our Digital Economy Outlook team, and I will ask them to join in responding to the questions. So the first question I see is, does the OECD plan to include other disruptive technologies along with big data analytics and artificial intelligence in monitoring? So maybe I can turn to Ms. Koksal Udot Elif to answer the question.
Thank you very much. Absolutely, we do monitor all these disruptive technologies. I invite you all to check out the chapter 11 on our technology outlook, where we shed light on the recent developments on AI strategies, but also the recent applications on blockchain technologies and the research on quantum computing. In addition, I invite you all to have a look at the Science, Technology and Innovation Outlook 2020, which will be launched in January, where you will have more information about the production of these technologies in terms of patents, but also in terms of the research on those disruptive technologies using bibliometrics data. Thank you.
Thank you, Elif. Turning to the next question, we see a lot of digital competition, but much less digital collaboration at a country level. When is this likely to change, and what might enable this? I'm going to turn to Ms. Alexia Gonzalez to answer that question. Alexia?
Hello, thank you very much, Audrey. This is an excellent question. And I think although some indexes portray countries as being in a somewhat competition, actually digital transformation calls for more collaboration among countries. Notably, when you have applications such as the Internet of Things, 5G, and artificial intelligence, these applications and systems are agnostic to borders, which call not only for interoperable technologies at the technical level, but also on interoperable regulatory frameworks. So the OECD has been working very hard in order to find this common ground. And many times this also entails a multi-stakeholder approach with all the companies involved in the digital transformation in order to come up with some guidelines. And a notable example would be the AI principles of trustworthy AI. There's been a global effort for this. But also we have examples like in European countries where they have 5G corridors among different countries in order for 5G to be applied for automated vehicles and you name it. So it just really calls for more collaboration in order to make this a successful digital transformation for all.
Thank you, Alexia. In the interest of time, since we're right at the top of the hour, I will turn it back to you, Deputy Secretary General, and thank you for your excellent chairmanship of the meeting.
Well, thank you, Audrey. Thank you to the whole team. Thank you to our panelists and the audience. Minister Passano, I still think she's on the call. It was a pleasure to have you here. Mr. Young, Mr. Mishra as well. Thank you so much. I think I won't spend long, but just take a minute to conclude that if there's something we've learned today, it's certainly that the digital economy is the economy. Maybe it's a false really labeling to talk about the digital economy, because what parts of the economy is not digital now. Let me just very briefly highlight three actions I think we should have in mind going forward. And the first one, it was also highlighted by Minister Pisano, is to improve access. The COVID-19 pandemic has really increased demand for high quality connectivity. We have to address rural-urban divides in access to broadband, to upgrade networks and enhance access to and the sharing of data. We are about to revise our OECD recommendation on broadband development. It's to narrow the digital divide by promoting widespread, affordable, and high-quality communication services. So we're working on that. Second one, action is to promote an inclusive digital society. We've heard a lot about that today, not least from the last panelist. Internet use has risen fast, but the digital divide remains. So as more people and firms go digital following this crisis, governments must work to ensure that everyone, regardless of age, income, education, gender, race, or nationality, is equipped with the skills necessary to succeed in this new digital economy. And third and last, we have to strengthen trust. The increased reliance on digital tools throughout the pandemic is stress testing systems designed to safeguard digital security and privacy around the world. So shared standards such as, for example, the OECD privacy guidelines and the recently updated OECD recommendation on digital security of critical activities can help sharpen our efforts to foster trust in the use of digital technologies. I want to thank everyone again, our team at the OECD, the panelists, the audience. Thank you for sticking with us. It's 2 minutes past 2, so we almost made it. As we recover from this crisis together, let's keep working together. Let's collaborate to harness the full potential of the digital economy for all. Thank you very much.